Well, hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone out there who is watching live. I see lots of you on here. Tell us where you are. Tell us how you're feeling. We had a lot of big astrological things going on this month. I think that's kind of the theme now till we die. There's lots of planetary things. So let us know what's up. And welcome into Buddhist Biohacker. I'm Lisa Gunshore, your mystic guide and host as always. And I am so thrilled today to have Kelly Wendorf from Equus here and author of Flying Lead Change. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thank you, Lisa. It's so great to be here.
I am just so excited. And just your book is so wonderful. And I have so many things I want to talk about. And I have a little story, a little context as to how I found you that I wanted to share with you and also with the audience. And welcome in, Annie. Wonderful. From Atlanta. Love it. Yeah, feeling everything. Truth. So I found your book about a year and a half ago and didn't even know you existed a year and a half ago. And what had happened for me is I had a miscarriage about a decade ago, and I've really been struggling with the grief. I still am. I mean, it's just kind of like there's all these layers, you know? And I had a horse growing up, and it came to me in a meditation that I should either get a horse or start working with horses again to help me with my grief. Mm-hmm. And shortly thereafter, I was, just searching books about horses because of this. And I found your book. And I'm going to try not to cry when I say this even. Mm-hmm. I opened your book and I'm reading the first few chapters and you talk about your miscarriage. And I thought, oh my God, I was meant to find this book. Mm-hmm. And so that was how I found you. And then as I learned more about you and I started following your work and, finished reading this book and started looking at your offerings, I was blown away at how aligned your work is with my own as far as moving out of that drama triangle into the space of the creator. And it's really become the focus of this community for me this year is how do we become the creator of our life? As a psychic medium, my work was a lot of telling people what was going to happen. And now my work has shifted to helping you understand, all of us to understand that we create what's going to happen next. And so that's my intro to how I found you, and just really excited to talk about all of this today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. And I really appreciate that story. And I love how you talk about how you found the book, but I would also say that the book found you. And I love to see where the book moves into time and space to reach people. And, I don't normally open like this with a podcast, but I feel like saying it now that, anything, we can talk about anything today, anything. So anything is up for grabs. So let's just open the floodgates.
I love it. I love it. And I want to open it to all of you in the audience too. If you have questions for Kelly and you want to jump in. Michelle, you're coming from Cleveland, Ohio today. I feel like for some reason I thought you were in Las Vegas. So welcome from Cleveland, Ohio. And Karen, welcome in. I love this. And you're working with Kelly. So that's pretty awesome. And
hi, Karen.
Yeah, Denise, welcome in. Nice to see you as well on here. So so I want to start with, I have a question. The first question for you, I have so many, but I think my first question is, I want to read from your book because I think this is so poignant since 2020, and this will help with my question. So flying lead change, what is that? And I want to just share with everyone, what is that? It's when an animal mid-flight changes their lead from left to right. Now, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the basics. And I want to read this. Collectively, we are facing the need for the same physics-defying maneuver. Our topography is radically changing, which requires us to change the way we lead our lives, families, and organizations. Such topography calls us to execute this change with similar mastery, attunement, care, presence, connection, mindfulness, openness to possibility, levity, suspension of old habits, maintaining momentum, levitation for a transition of balance into something new, humanity's flying lead change. What does that mean to you, Kelly, after 2020?
I think what comes to me is just how much more meaning there are to those words, that, things are getting, the topography shaping itself even more distinctly, even more drastically. And now more than ever, this is the moment. And I'm starting to see people from all walks of life come forward and make changes. The other day, I had a CEO of a mining company come here, and just to see his decision to live more deliberately, to partner with nature, to not throw his life away, but how could he just make this subtle inner kind of quarter turn in his heart, so that he is living from a place of concentrism, where he's connected to all things. And I don't know what the trajectory would be from his life, and how he would lead his company in this way. But if this kind of call to live our lives differently, more awake, more aware, more compassionately, less violently, if this call is making its way into sort of the black box of corporate America, particularly inside an organization like a mining company, then that's when I feel really hopeful. So I don't really know if I'm answering your question. I'm kind of sort of going off on a tangent, but it's both a call to who we are being asked to be, and kind of a promise that call in itself ensures that we will succeed, that we will make some kind of quantum leap that will change the outcome of things. So I'm incredibly hopeful. As bad as things are looking out there, and all one has to do is look in the news for a little bit, the more hopeful I become, which is a strange sort of paradox.
I agree with you. I always think this time of our lives, I think of when you turn on the light in a dark room and like all the spiders go running. It's like
right.
when the light gets brighter, you start to see all of the dark icky things, but it's a clearing and a purification. And I agree. I think, even just in reading this last year and thinking about, where we've come since 2020, even in my own community, and our understanding and our awakening. And one of the things that really jumped out to me in those pillars of leadership is safety. And I think what I'm noticing is so much language in the social media kind of buzz and highlights around, healing our childhood traumas. I think that's become much more of a discussion that's of the norm. And this idea of creating safety, I think, what does that mean for you in your life today? And how are you seeing it in your clients and your work?
Yeah, because without safety, nothing else is possible. I mean, just from a brain science point of view, if we're not feeling safe, there's so many parts of our brain we're not using, so much creativity we're not using. And safety to me has so many layers of what it really means. I mean, obviously there's this sort of superficial layer of physical safety and emotional safety and mental safety and spiritual safety. But it to me also points towards something that is inherently safe, which is the understanding that we're connected to all of life. just the sense that we are an individualized human, separate. I'm separate from you. I'm separate from this tree outside. I'm separate from the cloud. Just that pervasive lie that we are separate beings is inherently unsafe. And from that inherently unsafe place, we, perhaps we're making decisions around our well-being or our health or connection with another human. But if it's coming from this place of I am separate, then it doesn't matter the good intention of that action or belief or process. It's still based in a belief structure that is inherently unsafe. So for me, the biggest safety is to first understand our intrinsic belonging to one another. And when I say one another, I don't limit it to the human species, to one another, to the stars, to the trees, to the plants and the animals and the rocks and each other. And from that place, how do I want to live? So I think, and it's interesting to see that sometimes in the name of safety, there's this cancel culture and wokeism and all of this kind of thing that is designed to help us wake up to injustices and ways we don't treat each other well, but subtly embedded in a lot of the sort of semantics and the vitriol that happens in those spaces is I'm separate from you, and therefore I need to cancel you, or I need to shame you, or I need to, wag a finger at you in the name of justice. But all that does is perpetuate more separation. So how do we create safety in a way that we understand we're all in this together? We all must wake up together. Nobody's going to get out of this, separate from the rest. How do we call each other in to create more compassionate and nonviolent spaces without perpetuating the separation? That's a big question, right?
Yeah, I am so aligned with that. I even noticed like a simple thing like Amazon Prime, and there's more and more division of these categories. And it feels like we're going backwards from kind of all coming together. There's this bigger division that's happening right now. And I'll not forget, I followed the Dalai Lama for 7 years and worked as a volunteer and went to his events. And every single public talk, he typically says at least once, if not more than once, towards the end, we're all one. We are all one.
Yeah. And, it's a great bumper sticker and people like to wave it around, but, how does that really feel? And I'm not saying like, and I used to say this when I was more kind of not really understanding the inequities that were at play. I used to say, can't we all just get along? We're all one. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be distinguishing ourselves. Like there's a part to waking up where we say, actually I'm bisexual, actually I'm trans, actually I'm Black and I'm white, and I'm all those distinguishing moments and the identities and the experiences of those distinguishing characteristics of what it means to be in the human experience is important. And then healing can happen through that. And can the healing happen through the ultimate, non-distinguishing, not to silence those that feel that their identities are really important to lift up, but to create more understanding so that we start to build a shared experience. What's the shared experience of humanity? And can it include the shared experience of being a Black single mother? Can it include being a trans person? Not include into our white heteronormative world, but can it include, right? But can it include, so that our experience as human beings is incredibly diverse? And can we feel that in our bodies? So yeah, it's such an interesting time, because things are kind of, like you say, fragmenting and getting more and more broken apart. And at the same time, we're all starting to wake up to a greater compassion for each other, it seems. Slowly.
Yeah. What you're saying makes me think of my favorite Osho card in the Osho Tarot is participation. It's so much my favorite. It's tattooed on me, just so everybody knows. That's how much I love it. But it's a mandala that's a flower, and he talks about how each individual petal is individual and unique and beautiful on its own, and the flower that those individual petals make up is truly the goal, that interconnectedness that we all experience together, that the uniqueness is what makes the whole so profound, and seeing ourselves as that profound whole can help contribute to our uniqueness. And I do think, going back to the safety piece, like, that's part of being safe, is being safe to be ourselves and be those individual parts and pieces.
Yes.
And also feel safe in that greater whole.
100%.
Yeah.
I love that you brought that forward, because that describes it so well.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about, like, your awakening or your awareness. I mean, you share stories in your book, and I'd love to hear from you. Like, what was that moment for you where you realized you are part of that whole? When did interconnectedness come alive for you?
That's such a great question. I love that we get to talk like this.
Me too.
A couple of times that come to mind. I mean, it seems like, and I'm sure that everybody on this podcast will relate, that they can reflect back on their own life, that there were probably many sort of moments that came in to interrupt the normal way that we've been indoctrinated into thinking. The first, for me, that I remember very, very clearly is in Flying Lead Change in the book. I was 7 years old. My father was a very celebrated archaeologist, and he spent a lot of time overseas in Egypt and Africa. And he took, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. He took my little brother and I to Ethiopia, and my mother. And I was very young. My brother was 5 years old, and it was the 70s in Ethiopia. So, two little blonde-headed kids in the bush of Ethiopia we were a kidnapping target, because there was a lot of political unrest. But there were also baboons out there, and it was the age of being parented by benign neglect. So we were just going to be out there in the bush with my dad while he's on these digs. So he hired an Oromo warrior. The Oromo people are the indigenous people of Northwest Africa, I believe. And he hired Kabata to be our guardian for the time that we were there. And Kabata was just, it was kind of cinematic. He had this beautiful sort of shrouded white cloth over one shoulder and a little earring dangling, and very tall and lean. And I just took one look at this human and was totally in love with him. And he didn't realize it, but he was going to be my playmate for all these weeks. So we had a lot of time together, and we didn't speak the same language, so it was all kind of pantomime stuff. But we were very connected. And there was a moment towards the end of our stay there when we were having to leave. And he normally was standing kind of with his spear very erect all day, all night. I never saw him sleep, very kind of noble. And he was this time in a little metal chair, slumped over, and it was very early in the morning. And what I didn't realize is that we were going to get on a plane. I was 7, so I didn't realize we're getting on a plane. I'm never going to see him again. I don't think my parents really understood my connection to him. So everyone was kind of packing up the cars and the trucks and getting ready to go. And I jumped into his lap and was sort of, like really happy to see him. And I suddenly realized, oh, he's really sad. And I look, put my hands on his face. I'm looking at his face and he's crying. And something about that moment really did something very powerful inside me, because he was crying for me and grieving for the loss of me as if I were his own child. And my father was very difficult, and he was a narcissist. And, I'd never experienced that kind of fatherly love or relational love on that level. It was totally unconditional. It was totally beyond words. It was just completely there. And I sort of folded myself into his arms and had a few moments. And those moments just, I don't know what to say. They embedded something in me that was remarkable. And it had something to do with a deep, deep belonging to the whole. And that this belonging had nothing to do with something that I had earned. You know how it is, little girl in America, you have to be a good girl. And, this wasn't that. This was, you belong here with me on this earth in these ancient lands, you belong. So that was the first. It was a very embodied experience of belonging, and that it was a existential belonging. So that kind of set me apart from the rest of the kids when I went home to the States. I was too young to understand what I had experienced, but it did, I think, set me on a trajectory to recreate that experience, to search for it, to understand it, to recreate it. So that would have been the first. A second time, many, many years later, I started to become very intrigued with this idea of enlightenment when I was in my 20s. And at the time, you're 20, I'm 20, I'm like young and naive and selfish and all these things, and self-absorbed and all that stuff. And so I wanted enlightenment for me, because then it would make me this like really special human. And
funny how we do those things.
Yes, right. And I get to hang out in the inner circle with all the really special teachers. And but I think the seed to that search was from this experience with Kabbalah. And there was just a lot of egoic overlay around that as well, both. But I think, on one hand, I wanted to be this perfect human. And on the other hand, I wanted to experience something that I knew was out there and wasn't available in, conventional life. So I ended up in India. I ended up hanging out with a bunch of Osho folks. But I ultimately ended up in Lucknow with a teacher named Punjaji, who was by this time in his 80s. And not really doing much teaching. He was, a lot of people are gathering around him, but there was really not much to grasp from a mental point of view. And not many people know this story, but I didn't really know how I got there. I was naive. I'd never meditated before. And he, the day I walked in, he starts talking about horses. I walk into the meditation hall and he starts talking about horses. He never talks about horses, and this person next to me said, "Whoa, what are you coming in here with?" And by then I'd had a riding school. I was really into the horse scene. And it's an embarrassing story, but I think it's an important story. I went in there with all my kind of hubris, and I really was going to get enlightened, and he proceeded to completely annihilate me. He embarrassed me. He yelled at me. He screamed at me, really. And so many people that aren't on a spiritual quest would be like, well, why would you tolerate like that kind of thing? But I was far away. I was in India, and there weren't, quick flights home. And I happened to be staying in a little kind of sort of hostel place. And the guy who owned it said, I have a feeling you're here for some reason you don't really quite understand. So why don't you just hang out for a little while longer? And that night I had a very, very powerful experience because he had put me in such hell by screaming at me and embarrassing me and humiliating me in front of everybody. I was just really in the worst mental hell I had ever been in my life, which says a lot. And it was so awful that I finally asked the right question. I wasn't asking the right question before. The question was, how am I going to get enlightened? And when am I going to get married? And who, just all this like stupid stuff. And I finally was asking the right question. And the question was, how do I get free, from this hell, from all this suffering? How do I get free? What's true? I think was an even deeper question. What is true? And up until that point, I had been taught that feelings are real and thoughts are real and everything you imagine is real and all this stuff. And because I suddenly asked that question with all of the sincerity I could muster of what's true, the whole story blew up, like it just popped like a balloon, just like boom. And in its wake was just pure consciousness, pure, just, pure emptiness, pure, just absolute, I can't describe it. And that was a very powerful moment. It's kind of like the belonging of all belongings, right?
Oh my God.
So the next day I go to the satsang hall, and it's my last day there. And when it's your last day, you get to go and be in a smaller annex room with Punja to say goodbye. And I am laughing. I've been laughing all night long. I've been laughing hysterically the next day because I realized, like, wow, this whole movie of I'm a girl and I come from America and I have these problems and I'm codependent in this way, and all the whole story of what we're told was just totally not true. And it was so funny to me. And so I couldn't stop laughing. And everyone who had kind of played the game of the humiliation game, who thought, like, look at this stupid girl, they were like, ooh, wait a minute, what's happened to her? What's happened to her? Why is she so happy all of a sudden? She's just this stupid, naive loser girl. What's wrong? Why is she so happy? And I'm going in this room at the end, and he's sitting down with me, and there's a bunch of people sitting next to me, and they're kind of like, oh, did we miss something here? Like, did we miss something? And he looks at all of them with this like enigmatic kind of mock. He always did this sort of thing. He looks at them with this mocking kind of smile. He goes, oh, don't worry. Don't worry. You don't need to worry about anything because the trick is in her hand now. That's what he said.
Wow.
And the trick is understanding our true nature. That's the trick, right? And it doesn't mean like I went back to the States and, I got caught up in stuff, but you can never unsee that. So it was a very long story, but.
Oh, I'm so grateful you shared it. It's beautiful. And I'm curious, those moments of finding home, like you said, you went back, right? We go back into life and
all the time.
How do you find your way back in? Like, what's your way to find your way back in when you become aware that you're out?
Yeah. Yeah. And first of all, the freedom, right, to understand that we get lost again and again and again, like, and that's okay. That doesn't mean anything. And if we are attached to like being awake all the time, well, that's just another egoic structure. So like, okay, so what? Like, get caught up, come back again. It's not a big deal. Who's the one who's going to get caught up? Who's the one who's going to wake up? Like, that is a totally made up structure anyway. So, and we're kind of talking deep stuff here, but so really, honestly, my way back personally is whenever it gets painful, pain has become my friend, boy. It's sort of like the light on the dashboard of the car that kind of goes up, hey. So yeah, pain is usually what wakes me up the quickest. So I've learned to appreciate its presence. Yeah. Pain and suffering. And then it's, then it's whatever way in I can find. It can be time in nature, time with my horses. I'm a writer and a creator like you. So that's kind of my church. So that's my way back into take better care of my body, all those sorts of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you're saying. I think it's important to put an exclamation point on, we do get lost. We like lose our way. And, when I wrote the first edition of my book, it was like, oh, I have the answer, I have the cure, I have this and that. And when I rewrote it and republished it this last year, that was probably the most profound message I have coming out of that experience is there really isn't a cure.
That's right.
There's a way in, when you get out, you're going to come out and you're going to go in, and that's okay. And there's this beautiful quote about transformation is like the tide. And I can't get enough of that quote because it's so true. Transformation, it comes in and it goes out just like the tide. And I just love that so much because I think, that's just so how it is.
Yeah, totally. There was somebody who used to talk about the suffering seeker, because we had this idea, myself included, that there's just like this trajectory and it's all very linear. And I start down here and then I'm going to get like this and then I'm going to be perfect. And it's all, we live happily ever after. And one of my most favorite chapters of Pema Chodron's is a chapter on hopelessness. Befriending hopelessness. And it, you have to take some time with that chapter, but this idea that like there's, and isn't it funny? I just talked about there being hope for humanity, but what she's really saying is like, just give it up, that there's like a hope for a better you. Just relax. You're going to have good days, bad days, feel really clear and aligned and feel like a total mess. And like, just like relax, it's all okay. And then what surfaces is a kind of unconditional well-being, or a well-being that's unconditional of circumstances, a well-being that's kind of underneath all the ups and downs and tides in and tides out that happen in life. And we kind of relax a little more, and we're okay with being awkward and lost and whatever. So
yeah, I love that. I've read that book. I love that. And I think that's why I loved His Holiness so much, because he's very real. He's like, listen, I get jealous. I always tell everyone, watch the jealous bird story on YouTube with the Dalai Lama, because that's how he is. He's like, I get angry, I get jealous. I'm normal. I'm just like you. We're not really different. And I think it's so important to remember that there's no like pedestal to stand on, really. The more awake you become, the more you know nothing. Have you noticed that?
Yes. Totally. I mean, I just find more and more I just share stories. It's like, but what's there to really know? Yeah. And there's, as there's just this enormous multi-billion-dollar spiritual industrial complex that promises some, nirvana. And it's, but you can't make a lot of money on not having answers.
Yeah, no, it's true. And those who know the truth probably don't care about the money, and probably no one will ever know that they exist. I mean, that's the thing that's so,
Yeah.
crazy about our world and our society. I want to shift gears. We have to talk about horses a little bit.
Okay.
We have to. I grew up going to horse camp every summer, and as intimidating as they were for me, it was like a challenge, right? Like, because horses, they're these big creatures, and they can be very scary, especially as a little kid, as a little girl. And then when I was in high school, we finally bought some horses, and I had a little Morgan horse who was born on the 4th of July, and her name was Yankee Doodle Dandy. And she was so stubborn and such a stinker. And I had to really learn so much patience from her, to approach her, to take care of her. She really demanded me to stop and to be present. And you obviously have this gorgeous work with horses. I'm like, okay, when can I get down to see you? Because
you must come out.
I love it so much. And so I just want to talk about, like, what are horses for you today? Like, what are they for you today?
Thank you. Well, I think it's important to say what they used to be, to have some context with what they have become for me. I mean, I was horse crazy little girl, had all the little Breyer horses on the shelves, and my poor mother had to drag me around to every stable possible so that I could just smell a horse or sleep with a bridle or whatever. I was just totally nuts about horses. And in spite of my experiences as a child, I was indoctrinated into the conventional approach to horses, which is they're big animals. You have to control them. You have to be the boss. So we all loved our horses, or so we said, but we were never taught, what is the horse's point of view? How do they feel about this? What do they want to do? And we're taught to be afraid of what they're capable of, because they are big, and because they're flight animals, they can do big things that can be scary and dangerous, especially if they're not in a good situation. So, I showed my horses. I was a horse trainer, a professional horse trainer for a long time. And it wasn't until my daughter, we were living in Australia at the time, and I had a horse there as well. My daughter wanted a pony, and I got her a little Welsh pony named Pippa. And she said to me, "Mommy," she's in all of her 8 years of wisdom, "I don't want to do horses like how you do horses." And it kind of broke my heart a little bit, because I wasn't, in the scheme of things, I was not unkind to my horses. But, children are very sensitive to all its forms of violence in all its forms. And, any bribery, corruption, manipulation, subjugation, any of those, it's all violence. So her little heart wanted to find a different way. So I went about finding someone who was sort of part horse whisperer and part child whisperer to work with her. And I was skeptical, because I had seen that some people resort to natural horsemanship because they're actually afraid to really engage with their horse. So I was a little bit like, I don't want to deal with this kind of stuff where the horse ends up being a spoiled, entitled, scary, dangerous creature, because that's also not okay. And I saw some very amazing things happen with this woman. Her name's Louise Kropak. She's in Australia. She's an amazing trainer. And Pippa the pony, and my daughter. And I had to completely unlearn everything I had, spent decades gathering as a horse professional, which is a lot. And a lot of people don't want to do that. But I had to completely throw it all away, everything, every tactic, every process, every way of doing a horse, and start over from scratch. And that was hard. I spent many, many months sitting in the horse paddock crying, And my horse very disengaged from me, because absent the manipulative tactics of what happens, the horse was like, I actually don't want to be with you, which was tough to hear. And I had to become the kind of human that is trustworthy, understands power, will support their power, but support mine too. It was quite a spiritual journey, actually, because it's one of shared respect and shared requests and shared, very nuanced negotiation of shared power. And there's no formula to it, because what might happen 5 minutes ago and might work 5 minutes ago isn't going to work with the same horse 5 minutes from now, because the horse is always in real time in the present moment, and they're not who they were 60 seconds ago. So I had to apply everything that I had learned in my days in India and everything I had learned on all my spiritual work, and apply it to my time with the horses. And in addition to that, I had to share in the journey that I was in with my horse. So, for example, who am I to teach my horse about flexibility and flexion and balance if I'm not willing to do the same exploration alongside them for myself? Am I flexible? Am I symmetrical in my riding? Am I balanced? If I'm not, who am I to teach the horse to do that if I'm not willing to be vulnerable in that exploration? So there's a whole kind of change of heart that had to happen, where and not holding the horse small and not holding me small, and it was just radical. So now who the horse is to me is a masterful spiritual teacher, and nothing less, absolutely nothing less. And what's amazing is that they're fine. If, there's this great cartoon by Gary Larson. Who doesn't love Gary Larson? Where it's several frames. And the first frame is these cows are on a hill and they're drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes and talking and stuff. And they're standing up. And then one of them goes, car. And then this car drives over the hill, and the cows get on all fours and they're munching on grass. And then when the car leaves, they get back up and they're smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee. And the horses are very happy to play dumb animal if that's how we want to see them. They're like, okay, we'll run barrels. Okay, well, all right, I'll win some ribbons for you, whatever. But and that's their degree of compassion, that they're like, all right, if this is what we need to do, this is where we'll hang. But it's no wonder that so many indigenous peoples saw them and see them as a wisdom companion. And here's where it's really interesting. In being a wisdom companion, sometimes you can't just defer your leadership with them, because that doesn't feel safe to them. Talking about safety, leadership, good leadership feels safe to them. So it's not like, oh, you're my teacher and you're just mirroring everything back to me and I'm just gonna do anything that you say I should do. And really good spiritual teachers, Papaji was like this. They're like, you have to find your way. It's not about just totally giving away your power and saying and doing whatever they want to do. It's like, no. I mean, the horse will be afraid, or the horse will be not confident, and that's part of how they teach you. So, yes.
I'm curious. We've talked here on the show about the Blue Star Prophecy and the star tribes and, what's happening on our planet. What are you seeing today, in present time, with your horses? What are they teaching you about where we're at right now as a planet, where we're headed? What's maybe changing or transforming? Because I think the animals show us a lot. Nature shows us a lot. Animals, especially. I'm curious what you're seeing with horses.
And I'd be really curious to hear how that sort of aligns or resonates or doesn't with, some of the cosmologies you're talking about. So from the horse's point of view, from what I can ascertain, I see the horses calling people forward, calling people to them, people who are not horse people. Doesn't matter if they're horse people or not horse people, or if they even like horses, it doesn't matter. But I see them calling people. I can't tell you how many times people say to me, I don't know why I'm coming. I dreamt of a white horse, and I just can't get it out of my mind. It doesn't make any sense to me because I have zero affinity with horses, but I just know I need to come and be with them. And so they're calling people forward to be the change. And that's one thing I see, and that they download something to them. I mean, there's learning that's happening and self-discovery and all kinds of stuff that's happening on this one level. When I'm facilitating a Equus experience session with people, there's that happening. But on a deeper level, there is some nervous system to nervous system, soul to soul, energetic thing that is happening that is unmistakable, that people know has happened. They might not know it right away, but a year later, I'll get an email saying, wow, everything changed after that encounter. So it's like they're awakening something in all these people. All these people are people who have a key role to play, whether they realize it or not. It may be something really simple, as in, somebody who's a really committed parent, or somebody who's running a big mining company, but they have a key role to play, or they would not be here. And the other thing I see is the love and compassion and kindness that these horses bestow towards people, like that we matter, that humans matter. This kind of story that is around like humans are the virus on the earth, and the earth would be better off without us, and if we extinguish ourselves, the world will just go on without us. No. That's just another part of the patriarchal narrative of shame. It's not true, not according to the horses, and I believe them. We are important for whatever reason. We're important, and we're worth being kind towards, and we're precious. I think that's the word I'm looking for. We're really, really precious. And so the horses are always kind of speaking to that inside individuals that is already free, already awake, worth loving, that kind of thing. The word shame cannot exist in that space. And so for reasons I don't understand, and I think, Lisa, you probably understand better than I do, there's a role that humans must play in the larger order of things. And I don't think this is arrogant. I think that our presence matters, and that's an important thing. And saying that we don't matter is just a cop-out, basically. We do matter. And so we better damn well get our act together, because a lot relies on our changing the tide. So that's what the horses are showing.
I love it. Well, and I'll share, my own direct experience about the horses calling. I mean, that was finding your book, which I shared that story. This decal behind me, I'm on opposite ends. Lovely horses that I love so much. I bought that on Amazon, I don't know, a couple years ago. And when I moved into this office, it just sort of appeared, and I was like, oh, I'm going to use this now. And so they do come forward and invite you in. And it's been years since I've connected with the horse. And now it's like all I can think about, to your point of what you're sharing. And, I certainly don't know everything either. What I feel right now is I feel like animals, have held this space of the heart. When we think of the chakras, like, to me, the animals are the unconditional green heart energy. And I remember when there was a fire on that sacred mountain that I can't think of the name of in Australia.
And Uluru, is that?
Yeah,
Yes.
when Uluru had the fire. And then this year touched me so much when Lahaina had the fire. And what I'm feeling, and this is my opinion and my feeling, this is not, who knows if it's truth or not, but what I feel is these heart centers on the planet are, becoming phoenixes. They're clearing out. And I feel like it is time for the human race to hold the heart space, and that animals are inviting us to join them in this frequency of love, unconditional love and compassion. And that to me is the invitation. That to me is what the animals are saying now. And there's, unfortunately, there's species leaving. And I think that part of that, is because there's not a need to be here. It reminds me of my favorite story, Kelly, of Kuan Yin, is that when Kuan Yin was here, she watched over all the animals. And one day it was time for her to go. It's time for her to leave. And the animals all surrounded her, and they were so sad. They were like, please, Kuan Yin, please, please, please don't leave us. We can't be here with these humans. And she pointed at this very ugly brown bird, this hideous, ugly bird, and she asked it to step forward, and she touched this bird on the top of its head, and it completely transformed and became the peacock.
Oh.
And she asked the peacock to open up its feathers, and it opened up its feathers, and she said, don't you see, these are my 100 eyes, and I will be watching you always. And that story, just whenever I think of that story, I think of that is what the animals have been for us. They have held this space of the bodhicitta and compassion and love and been watching over us. And I feel like they're asking us now, no, you have to join us. Like, we can't do this alone. We need you to be here with us. That's what I think is happening. And I think in the cosmology of all of it, like, I think that's, whatever is happening with the interdimensional beings, and this idea of, aliens. I hate that term. I like interdimensional beings, but aliens are in the news, right? They're in the news. People are talking about it. And I think it's the same thing. I think they're inviting us. I think there's this invitation from all around us. Like you said, get your act together. Like, come on. Like, stop dividing. We're all one, and not just we as humans are all one, but we're one with the animals. We're one with the interdimensional species that are out there. We're one with all of this energy of the universe and beyond. And I think that, to me, when I think of, what my horse taught me as a teenager, is the same thing. It's this, to respect ourselves, the boundaries. I love that whole part in that chapter. And you're going learning the boundary with the horse, and that the horse that was getting kicked and kind of beaten up by the herd because it didn't have boundaries. And it was like, whoa, what an eye-opening. That was really, for me, really put some things into perspective that I've been working on with boundaries. And I just love that, because they teach us how to keep ourselves safe.
Yes.
Keep them safe.
Yes. Yeah, beautiful. No, I know. My dogs were sleeping around me the other day, and I said to my partner, it's just like being surrounded by angels. It just so much love in the space with these animals. And as Uncle Bob, my teacher, Uncle Bob, the Aboriginal teacher, said to me, nature misses us. So anytime we find ourselves entertaining that story of like, oh, humans, we're just like, all we do is like mess everything up, and the earth would be better off without us. No. Change the story.
We have a question from Sienna. She said, I understand it's tailored to each person, but what is the Equus experience? I'm curious what a retreat day could look like. I am too.
Oh,
Let's
that's
all
so,
go.
yeah. Yeah. So I can give you a few examples because, I mean, there are some basic things that happen all the time when you come here and do a retreat. And the retreat can be a half-day retreat, or it can be a one-day retreat or a 2-day retreat. Some people have done a whole week-long retreat. But you are here, the whole place is yours, and everything that we have accessible to us is yours. But what I do is I'll hop on the phone call and followed by a questionnaire and really listen for what are you coming with? What's up for you? What do you want to spend time with? What are some of the questions that are, kind of dogging you at this time? Or what do you sense is possible, but you aren't quite sure how you're going to get there? Whatever those sorts of questions can help provoke and open up for you. And at that point, it's my favorite word. I love to curate the retreat. So for sure, it will have time with the horses, which it can be anything from there's like 180 things you could do with a horse, probably 500 things you could do with a horse. But so it can be anything from sharing space with the whole herd. We have 6 horses and 2 donkeys, so 8 equines. Sharing space with them and really learning what the horses are saying to you, the horses and donkeys, what they're reflecting back, what they're modeling, what they're teaching. And, to someone looking from the outside in, it might look like paint drying, but for the person who's actually in the experience, it's not like that at all. Mm-hmm. So there's dialogue about that. There's exercises that we develop around some of the insights that come forward. And then I have other faculty members who, like, for example, Nicole, who's a Lakota initiated pipe carrier and shaman. She might come and do a bodywork session, or she might do a spirit animal journey, or a pipe ceremony, or a medicine wheel teaching. So she may come in for a couple of hours. Thunder Bear is my ranch manager, but he is a member of a dual member of the Tesuque and Nambe Pueblos. And he sometimes comes in and spends time with people. And really with Thunder Bear, there's conversation, but there's just a beautiful transmission that happens with him. My property's adjacent national forest, so oftentimes we'll use the land and do hiking and meditation and different experiences in nature. So it varies. And someone thinks, wow, like if I did a 2-day retreat, well, that's a lot of time. That's 12 hours of, because it's 6 hours a day. It goes so fast. It's just amazing. But you have me and the land and the animals all to yourself. And people leave they just leave changed. That's what I can say. They leave changed. So I hope that answers your question. It's varied, and yet for sure you'll be engaged with the animals, the land, the indigenous qualities of this place, and the energies of this place.
I love it. Well, I have loved this time. It has
me too.
And I hope you come back and we can talk some more.
I would love that, Lisa.
Me too. Crystal says, I love this. The horses are calling us. I feel this. Yes. So.
And I want to say, like, even if you aren't near a horse, like, check it out how the horses have Lisa's back right now on the show. So if they appear to you in a dream, if they appear to you in your imagination, if you're compelled to just kind of hold them in your consciousness, that they're realm travelers. So you don't have to only be with them in person. So just take up their invitation and include them in your awareness.
Yeah. And I invite you, if you haven't already picked up Flying Lead Change, I love it. I actually refer to it a lot. And as a leader myself, like the pillars, I'm really actively working with those and working with what it looks like to lead differently. And so I just love it. So I highly recommend this to everyone if you haven't picked up the book. And before we close, I'd love to give some space, Kelly, for anything that you'd love to share that you have happening right now or that you want to invite anyone into.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, two things. I thought about this, and I would love to give your listeners a special 50% off the book. If they go into the Equus website, equisinspired.com, and go to the shop and enter the code podcast 50, they can receive a book at a discounted price. So that. And I'm doing a course, an 8-week course very soon. It starts in March. It's called The Wisdom of Thriving. And it is a deep dive into the material in the book, which just goes through each chapter of the book and does a real deep dive into all the exercises that are in the book and the 7 principles of thriving. And so that's starting soon. And I would really, really love if some of you would join me in that course. So thank you. Thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah. And I would say that, one of the things that I'm learning is what kind of marketing I want to engage in. And I will say, Kelly, I love your newsletters. And they're one of the newsletters that I really read. And so I just want to open it up to the audience, join Kelly's mailing list just because they're inspired. I mean, what you share is so inspiring and supportive, and it's resourceful for us. And so I really value and appreciate that. It's inspired me. I mean, I've asked myself a lot of those same questions, like how can I create content that's inspiring rather than personal? And so I just want to kind of shout that out because I think I look forward to getting your newsletters and what I'm going to think about and contemplate for the day. So I just want to throw that out there too.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you. That's so kind. Yeah, I love developing content for that. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I invite you, Kelly, to stay on for a minute when we go off so that we can connect. And to everybody out there, I really appreciate your time and energy being in this space with us here. If you haven't noticed, I am absolutely producing less show content because I want it to be more quality over quantity. So I do want to share our next show won't be until next month, but I'm really excited to say that Dr. Jill's going to be on. She's become quite famous these days, but she saved my life twice. And she has a brand new book, her new book coming out that's really beautiful. So I'm excited to finally share her with all of you because I've known her a long time now, and she's an incredible functional doctor and healer. So she'll be here next month. And thank you again, Kelly. I really appreciate you on. Thank you. Oh, and Crystal just signed up. Yes, do it. And thank you, everybody. Have a fabulous week. And I will see you either here or someplace else on social media or in the studio. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.